I read something, someone said, if you don't have 10 minutes for yourself every day, you really need to take 2 months off and reevaluate.
You're listening to Season 2 of the Mies Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level, day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show. I was doing a little digging. Couldn't find much other than I think you went to Brown.
Yeah.
When did you go to Brown?
I graduated 2009.
Gee, man, I'm old. I went to Johnson & Wales.
Oh, really?
I graduated in like 2099 or 2000.
You're a chef?
Yeah. I spent most of my career cooking.
Oh, cool.
Like fine dining, New York City kind of thing. But we did a bunch of partying on Thayer Street.
Yeah. Where? Do you remember?
Bit. I mean, no.
What was your favorite restaurant in Providence?
So for me, the pizza shop, the wood fire pizza place. Oh my God! Now I'm spacing on the name. It's near Brown.
On
oh my God! Now
was it on Thayer or no?
Wiley, I'm sorry, because Wiley actually worked there. And,
Fellini's?
No, I'll remember it, and then I'll
Fair,
make a note about this. But there's a really awesome, like, they're still around. Actually, I don't have my phone, or I would Google it. But there's a pizza joint there that I really love. Otherwise, to be honest, man, I was like 17.
Yeah.
Going to culinary school, working every day.
Yeah.
So I didn't really and I actually didn't even get into cooking fully until after that. Like,
what did you do after college?
Well, I kept cooking, but I went to I entered this contest when I was in culinary school, and I ended up somehow making to the finals and then winning, and so they flew me to New York, and
oh wow.
The judges were these chefs that now I know very well. Luckily, I didn't know them back then. Eric Repair and Marcus Hambleson.
Oh, Jesus.
And, Rick Moonen and Rocco DeSpirito.
Oh, wow.
But I ended up winning, so they flew me to Norway for we all went to Norway.
This was after college or before college?
Yeah, after.
Oh, wow.
So I cooked I cooked in Norway and sort of saw a bunch of restaurants, and I mean, that's what I was like, holy shit, I'm going to finish my life. But anyways.
What was the competition?
It was for the Norwegian Seafood Export Council hosted this contest. I think they were just trying to promote, Norwegian salmon.
Yeah.
So it was just like a competition with salmon with people from around the world, and
wow. That's incredible.
That's kind of what kickstarted, my actual career in cooking. When I lived in Providence, first of all, it was still, what's the mayor's name that was there?
Cianci, Buddy Cianci.
Yeah, it was still that kind of time.
Yeah.
I think he had just sort of been indicted or something, or stepped down. So it was a different city back then. But I didn't eat out that much. What about you? Did you?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's where I knew my background in food came from. I used to, when I was in Providence, and I bet it's still true to some extent, they used to say the best food in Boston was in Providence. Or the best restaurant in
I never
Boston.
heard that.
Yeah. I mean, it was just, we used to eat out on Federal Hill all the time. I would go downtown to Al Forno.
Al Forno, that's the place.
Oh, is that the place?
That's what I was thinking about. Al Forno.
So that's grilled pizza, though. It's not wood-fired.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's grilled. Al Forno. That was the one that...
Oh, incredible. So we used to go, and I realized, I did the math that a meal in the food hall was roughly broke out to $18 a meal. And so I convinced my parents to get off the meal plan. And
that's smart.
Yeah, and I would go down there and split a pizza and a pasta, and it was $21. We'd eat it in our car in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So I guess I've always been obsessed with food.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You do 4 years at Brown?
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah. That was is that your only college?
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. I always remember being at, in culinary school and, running into the Brown kids or the RISD kids and being like, oh yeah, that's actual college students.
Barely.
Why'd you go to Brown? You're not from that area, right?
No, I'm from Long Island.
Yeah.
I went to Brown I played tennis, so it was a great tennis program. My parents wanted me to go to a good school, and it was the right mix of academics, athletics, and I wanted, I didn't spend a lot of time studying in high school, and so I wanted a place that allowed me to kind of figure out, broadly what I wanted to do, and I was sort of attracted to the nature of the school.
What'd your parents do?
So my mom she's a PhD in psychology. She's a professor. She's head of her department at SUNY Old Westbury, and my dad is an engineer by trade. So
Software,
both,
electrical,
mechanical engineering.
Nice. I don't know if your parents. So my dad wanted me to go to Wharton.
He wanted you to go to work.
Yeah, I went to culinary school instead. How your parents? I mean, obviously you're doing really well now, but you went to Brown and now you have restaurants.
Oh no, it's a huge. I mean, my dad wanted me to go to Wharton. My mom wanted me to go to Harvard. So I managed to disappoint them both.
But are they? I mean, I'm sure they're like.
I think
now.
they're getting there. It's my mom. I think I take a lot of my food passion from her. She was an incredible home cook and spent a lot of time and energy, and it was a real passion of hers to make Indian food more accessible and more healthful and more approachable, because we grew up in a all white town in Long Island, and I loved to host. She loved to host, but at the time Indian food was quite foreign to a lot of people, so she was always figuring out ways to make it a little bit easier to understand, healthful, bright, etc. She understands how I got from where I started to where I am now. My dad, I think it's been a little bit more of an adjustment period. I heard once that immigrant parents are driven principally by fear. And I think that's very much true for my dad. I think he just always worried about where my next meal was going to come from, literally. And so, I left a very stable, very lucrative career at the age of 26 to open this. And it's been, we've been lucky. We had great investors from the beginning, and our first restaurant, we had a line out the door the day we opened. So failure was never really the thing I was worried about. But I think, it was just a big adjustment, going from making a lot of money to making no money. And I think now we're at a point where my dad's starting to see the vision and understands a little bit why we did what we did. But in the beginning, his first thing he said to me is I can't believe you're opening a restaurant, and it's not even a restaurant I can bring my friends to, so. Yeah.
It's funny because, my background was mostly in sort of fine dining, and then I opened a bunch of my own fast casual restaurants. I ran a restaurant group that had a bunch of fast casual spots as well.
Oh, cool.
And I think of scaled fast casual restaurants. I was like, oh yeah, that's a business.
Yeah.
And fine dining restaurant is
that's
a project.
Yeah, it's a project.
It's a project that could make money. Sometimes it can, and sometimes you can make good money on it. But it's a completely different,
completely different.
When you think about unit economics and things like that, when you start to scale something like this, it's far more of thinking about supply chain and scaling things.
Totally.
So we'll talk about that. But first, I'm just most interested in, you started an Indian concept. I'm pretty passionate because I used to work for an Indian chef here in the city for a long time.
Who's that?
Floyd Cardoz.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know the trials and tribulations of trying to get Americans to appreciate Indian cuisine. It's funny because I hate even saying the word Indian cuisine because it's like saying Mexican food.
Right.
There's so many. There's the South. There's Goa. There's Hyderabad. There's Kashmir. There's so many different areas that are completely different.
Sure.
My first question was just where are your parents from, and what kind of food did your mom cook? Or what did she sort of like?
So my dad is from Hyderabad, which is in the South.
Yep.
My mom is from Calcutta, which is in the Northeast, and so she eats Bengali food. He eats kind of Andhran food, is called. And so they're very, very different cuisines. They're both, I guess every region in India is a very food-focused cuisine and culture. But my mom learned to cook both North and South Indian food to make her in-laws happy, to kind of retain her family stories. So she really could cook anything. And she would cook 3 meals a day for my dad, and she would cook 3 separate meals for me and my sister. So
really?
Yeah. So she was always just in the kitchen making food, and she had a full-time job. So
did she make you all
So we ate American food. My dad would eat Indian food, and then by the time we were in our teens, it started sort of melding together.
Where did she buy all of her spices and things?
It's a good question. I mean, she would bring, whenever she went to India, she would come back with spices. There's a place in Long Island that now is kind of a chain called Patel Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
There was little small Indian kind of markets. Now you have full supermarkets.
Did she ever come to Calusian City or anything?
No. If she ever walked into Calusian, she would die of a heart attack.
Really? What?
Just the prices are so crazy.
Oh yeah,
it's like the antithesis of what in her mind. I mean, that's part of the problem, is that people still think Indian food and Indian spices, even Indians believe this should be cheap. So
yeah, it's a battle with a lot of these types of cuisines.
Totally.
And it's so funny, the perception of what food should cost, in the States, and it is a lot of it is different ethnicities and their cuisines, and also just some of the more simple American food. I remember I had a group of restaurants called Bark Hot Dogs back in the day.
Okay. You had one on Bleecker, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
We would make our own bratwurst with cheddar from upstate and heritage pigs, and it was this beautiful sausage
on
a really great bun, and we make our own relishes, and it was this
beautiful artisan thing, in a paper boat,
Yeah.
in a bun,
Yeah.
you can't charge more than $6, $7, $8
Yeah.
tops.
Yeah.
Put it on a plate, slice it, make that sauce like kind of like go in a swirl,
Right.
and have a smaller piece of bread on the side, and you can charge $30.
Right.
And there's just like this perception for some reason of like food that's fast.
Fast has to be cheap.
Yeah, or even just food that's like simple. It's really frustrating. Floyd opened a place called Bread Bar.
Yeah, of course.
And by the way, just insanely good.
Yeah.
Like, some of the best food in Sydney time. And then he opened some other like street food type spots. There's just that constant sort of battle of like price point. So like, I remember when you opened.
Yeah.
Because we had an office around the corner on 22nd Street.
Yeah.
And I remember the line at the door, but it was very like different style of.
It was, yeah.
Than how you're doing today.
It was, yeah.
It's like
yeah. So we opened. I mean, I guess what you're not asking, but maybe you're thinking is like, why, knowing everything you knew about Indian, why would someone open a fast casual Indian?
Yeah.
For those that aren't watching and just listening, I am Indian, so it felt very natural. But first of all, I felt like a calling to the cuisine. I grew up. There's a term called ABCD, American Born Confused Desi. Desi means like person of Indian descent. And so I was very much an ABCD. I didn't sort of embrace the culture or the food. And somewhere in my 20s, I just felt like a longing and a connection to wanting to represent or learn more about my own heritage, my own cultural identity, became more curious about the food and the cuisine. And I just felt like there was this huge missed opportunity because I saw the way, this was like kind of in the beginning of the advent of like when healthy eating and fast casual went mainstream, when it felt like, maybe we were 5 or 6 years into the farm to table movement, which in and of itself is kind of shocking that like people had to be reminded food came from farms, that was always sort of interesting to me.
I know, like where else is it going?
Yeah, it's like, okay, but the healthy eating, healthy living, kind of this idea of mindfulness, yoga, taking care of your body, all these things were kind of like hitting the sort of modern zeitgeist. And you started seeing turmeric lattes and this idea of superfoods. And I felt like Indian food was ripe to tell that story.
Yeah.
I think we were really early when we started. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. I had the great benefit of youth. Like I just didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And so Indian food felt like there was no Indian brands at the time on a consumer playing field. And I just felt like there was an opportunity to do something a little bit different. So, and it felt very organic to who I was. So we tried Indian. We opened, as you mentioned, like the first one was fast casual, strictly fast casual. It's like a assembly line format. We used the same. I said I didn't want to be like another Chipotle, but we hired a Chipotle interior designer, a Chipotle kitchen designer. We ended up with something that looked very much like a Chipotle. And it was really funny. I sat down like couple days before we opened. I sat down with Steve Ells, who was the CEO at the time, founder and CEO, brilliant innovator, created a category.
How did you get
with
him?
I was out at a dinner party that we were like engineering the operation to be scalable, blah, 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 blah. And he said, "Who's the GM going to be of your second store?" And I was like, I don't know. I was like completely mystified by the question. He's like, if you're not already thinking about people planning and people development and putting your culture at the center of your company, you're never going to make it. And so that was lesson number one. And then lesson number two was like, if you're copying Chipotle is a 20-year-old business model.
Yeah.
You're going to be out of business in 20 years. So that kind of idea never left my head. And I felt like, the first store, it was successful, but I felt like, but this is before we had data around this stuff, I just felt like we were losing more customers than we should be because people were so unfamiliar with the cuisine and so unfamiliar with the ingredients. And I didn't just want to be a salad bar or a Chipotle where, you just had raw ingredients that were chopped up. I wanted to serve flavorful food, bright food, interesting, chef-driven. And you just can't really, in my opinion, do that on an assembly line format where people are picking their own ingredients. So
yeah, there's so many things to unpack there. Because like one, if you go on a Chipotle assembly line, you know exactly what all those things are.
I always say that the great magic about Chipotle is 90% of your decision's been made for you the second you walk in the door.
Yeah.
You can add sour cream or a wrap. Those are the only two real options. Everything else tastes the same.
Yeah, and decision fatigue is a real problem.
Totally.
With not just with throughput, but just like with like consumer demand. But you brought something up that I think is so like I experience a lot. I'm sure you probably do as well. I think anybody with a business today experiences where like startups and people in the startup that work with you or yourself comparing yourself to these legacy companies.
Sure.
Like, oh, well, this is how we did it at this company that's been around for 30 years.
Sure.
And this is how we operate. This is how this department works. And this is how this thing works. And it's like, one, things are completely different.
Yeah.
So the obvious one, okay, sure, there's AI. Now things are faster. But also, like, you don't start that way.
No.
You know, like, you evolve into this thing. And if you try to like start the way that something else has evolved into, one, it's not your own sort of like vision, and two, probably will never work. I think that gets missed so often. And it's tough because we also, like, as business owners, we compare ourselves to incumbents.
Of course.
Because you have to.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's really hard to not do this, but like their practices most of the time won't work for us because like Danny Meyer has a great saying that, like, never think about like opening the second restaurant until people, are knocking down your door to come to the first one.
Yep.
The first thing you need is demand, then you can figure out how to scale it.
Yeah.
And that's true with anything, like first figure out, like, do people love this product?
Totally.
At all?
Totally.
And is there enough of it that like it's worth scaling? Clearly that happened here.
Yeah.
So I don't know when you swapped format from assembly line to the ordering, but like what was like the impetus or the catalyst for like, let's open store number 2?
I'm going to speak on both sides of my mouth because on the one hand, I always agreed with that concept that, and I think I understood intuitively that fast food was a people business, reminders from people like Steve Ells in that conversation. But I kind of always really believed that you had to earn the right to open your second or third or fourth, and that, treating everything like a concept is that's meant to scale is like the first way to turn off consumers. And also, you lose a lot of the integrity and the soul of what you're doing. So we opened our first one in end of 2015, early 2016. We opened our second one in 2018. So it actually took us a while to get our second one open by fast casual standards. We were profitable. We thought we understood the business. I had a good team in place. And the flip side of it, as much as we took our time, I never wanted to be a single unit operator. I didn't want to open a restaurant. It wasn't a project for me. I wanted to build a business. I had aspirations to build a brand. I thought the restaurant business was an incredibly wonderful and rewarding and honorable place to like spend a lot of time and build something. But it was always in my mind a company before it was a restaurant.
Yeah.
So I wanted to not take any shortcuts, but at the same time, I always had an eye towards trying to make something that would really change the way fundamentally people thought about Indian food.
Yeah. Well, I think for anybody that doesn't understand the like this type of model, a fast casual model of any kind, it only works at scale because the top line you can do in one store, right? You have a low price point. And if you have high volume, like the unit economics work. Like when you have, you almost need to, after the first store, you have to invest in buckets. Otherwise it doesn't really, you have to know that you can actually open up 2, 3 more. Otherwise, you're just kind of like working for the,
No, for the landlord. I mean, forget about unit economics. You also have a different sort of issue where in this day and age, to open multiple restaurants, you need a head of training, a head of IT, you need marketing, you need someone I have someone full-time basically just looking at third-party delivery,
It's nuts.
It's like we have 20 software providers that come in between us and our customer. So it's like, you're always out in front with corporate resources. And so you need to open the stores to pay off the expanded corporate team. And it's just like a chicken and egg thing for a really long time.
Yeah. So your second store came a few years later.
Yeah.
When did this new... So
format?
I remember Inde when it opened, and there was like very, very similar to Chipotle, assembly line. I'll take this base. I'll take these things. I'll take this cauliflower. Put the sauce on.
Yep.
It was good. It was really good. I remember. But then at some point you changed to this new model where you're
so our second one we removed. We built the serve line, and then we put frosted glass up so you couldn't see what was on the line, but you walked down the line. So you had to place your order at the beginning of the line, and then you just like tortured yourself through the end.
Baby steps.
It was baby steps, and honestly, it was like this, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like I had some conviction that this was the right way to build a business, where you had to order with a hospitality specialist or cashier that was going to guide you through the ordering process, and then you picked up your meal at the end of the line. But I thought, we spent a lot of money on the space. If it doesn't work and people don't adapt to this serve line model, to this service model, I'll have to put in new glass and then just run it like a Chipotle-esque, because we knew that worked at our first store.
Yeah, you were hedging your bet.
What's that? I was hedging, for sure. We hedged, which I honestly, I don't begrudge myself for. And that's, by the way, the second store was busier than the first store.
Yeah.
And then the third store was busier than the second store. And then by that time, it was 2019. we had raised our first like real round of capital from a big, family office. And we thought we were going to, we'd had 3, it was profitable. We felt pretty good about where we sat. There was no one else doing what we were doing. We had grown in our minds pretty slowly, 3 in 3 years was like, we took our time, we were patient. And then we'd raised a bunch of money, ready to open 5. And then 2 months later, pandemic hit. So I almost look at our business in 2 ways. It's like before the pandemic and after the pandemic. It felt like we started a new company.
Yeah. This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Meez. Meez helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Meez is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Meez in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices because Meez will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Meez podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Meez.
Man, I gotta be honest. From the outside looking in, I've only sort of seen your business grow from visiting it over the years and seeing the changes. But it seems like a lot of resiliency to get where you are today because, you changed the model a couple of times. This model, by the way, generally speaking, fast casual in New York City is just freaking hard.
Yeah.
Like there's so much competition.
Yeah.
You have COVID. It's Indian food, which, if you're talking frequency, I'm sure that's a battle to get over. How do you manage all the stress of
this? It's a good question. I think about it every day. I would say therapy.
How often do you therapy?
Once a week. Started about a year ago.
It's good.
And certainly helpful. I have great family support. My wife is a wonderful partner and really believes in what we're doing, which helps. And so she's often the person that is the first to tell me that you got to kind of look inward. And if you believe in what you're doing and you love the product and you love your team, it might take longer than you want, but you're going to figure it out. You can't keep comparing yourself to other people. And so that's something I need a constant reminder of. And honestly, at the end of the day, I think there was definitely moments during the pandemic where I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe we tried our best. I've been at this 5 years. There's got to be easier ways to make money. And I started looking around and, the CPG companies that raised $10 million off of $200,000 of revenue and a lot of the tech startups and a lot of this, that, whatever, nothing seemed easy. Felt like gravity was coming for everyone.
Yeah.
Then interest rates went up and you're seeing it, what's happening. It's just, I think anything worth pursuing today is hard. I'm sure your business is hard. I'm sure restaurant tech and SaaS and all this shit. It's I'm not resigned to doing it because everything is difficult, but I think the humbling experience has made it just really clear to me that anything worth doing and pursuing is it doesn't move in a straight line, and no one's owed anything. You got to go build it.
I feel like we talk about this a lot on this show, just with my friends. Business doesn't get easier; it gets harder. Over time. And anybody from the outside in, and we all do this, right? We look at our friend's business, be like, I should do that business. So much easier. There's less complexity.
Totally.
Every business is fucking hard.
Every business is hard.
And it doesn't get easier. And the only thing that matters is that you know why you're doing this. Because no matter what.
You got to be in touch with your why.
Someone's going to pop up, be like, okay, we're if you don't really, really want to do this and you're not really clear as to why, give up.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think I know this because we talked about it. I know I can sort of ascertain that you want to sort of introduce Indian food to more people. But is there a bigger why as to why Inde exists?
I think that's part of it. I feel compelled. I love food, first of all. I love food. I love being around food. I love the cooking of food, the making of food. And I tell people every day now, just loving food is not enough to get into the restaurant business. Just be a great customer, tip well, come back often. But food brings me a lot of joy. It always has. I think it's like a love language for me. I cook for my family, for my friends when I'm feeling stressed. It's just something I like to do. I love Indian food because I feel it helps connect sort of the story of who I am. Our corporate sort of company daily motto is good karma served daily. For me, that's like a way of life, and it's something that I think about all the time. And it feels like if I can leave that impact on one person a day, like that's a life worth living. It's a company worth building. I'm sure when you walked in, you saw the teams like outside meditating and stretching. That's like we've built in all these daily rituals. It's becomes
that's cool.
part
I
of it.
actually didn't realize that.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome.
You saw them outside.
I saw them outside.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize that they were doing that.
She's lighting incense right now. It's just, we built in these daily little reminders that your day begins within. You are you are your thoughts, you're your actions. And if we can leave things a little bit more positive, a little bit more connected, a little bit more peaceful than where we left them, where we started, that's a life worth living. So I'd say that these behaviors have picked up a life of their own. We don't tell our teams to do that anymore. We showed them how to do it, and we said, if it works for you, keep doing it. And now they do it in their restaurants, and it feels really special and humbling to be a part of that. In some ways, it's about the food. In some ways, running a company like this feels bigger than the food.
And it is, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure the services as well, and all these things are part of the product. Yeah, I find more and more as I get older, because I'll be honest, when I started restaurants, I was 28 when I started my first, when I opened my first restaurant. Like, I didn't think about it. I didn't realize, the people are everything. That's actually your business. Yeah. And not just that, but like finding people that believe the same thing that you believe, or at least sort of like injecting that in them where they're like, oh shit, that's awesome. I want to do that too.
Yeah.
It's really like everything. I'm just seeing more and more, like for us, like I started my company because
when did you start Mies?
The idea for Mies was many years ago. We launched to the public in 2021. We did this thing during COVID. We were supposed to launch during COVID, and instead we basically gave it away to chefs and let them sell their recipes to their customers and friends, and they just helped them generate thousands of dollars for themselves and for their business because they didn't have a restaurant. But I started because like I see so many restaurants that close where the person that started it is smart and talented and works their ass off, and it drives me nuts and it breaks my heart. And Mies, for me, like my company exists to help people scale their vision and really just allow you to be creative and profitable. Yeah, because those two things typically are like at odds. Yeah, and that sucks. And that's so like for me every day, like this has to work because all of my friends are using it, and the friends of friends and friends of friends of friends, and like having something where you feel like this deep, like almost obligation, like to fulfill the vision. Yeah. Helps to like keep it going and making sure no matter what, that like I'm just maniacal about like driving it forward. Done. Yeah. I wish, to be honest, that I had a more holistic, softer sort of vision that you have of just like, giving good karma and starting the day right. That's one thing that I struggle with. And I'm curious how you integrate that into your day-to-day, because you run a business that has multiple locations. You now acquired another company. You've now helped your staff to like do yoga in the morning and incense. But like, what about you personally? Like, how do you like do that in your life?
It's hard. One of our core values is begin within. And so the idea is that you are in control of your thoughts, of your emotions, of your actions ultimately. And so for me, it's about finding a pocket of time in the morning that I can carve out for myself, set my intention for the day, try to move my body a little bit, try to meditate, breathing exercise. And it's not always perfect. And I think that's part of being in this like forward momentum, is that you understand that perfection doesn't exist, but you got to set the time. Yeah. And I read something, someone said, if you don't have 10 minutes for yourself every day, you really need to take 2 months off and reevaluate. And so, I think there's all sorts of incredible tools now, 5-minute meditations, 2-minute breathing exercises. There's countless studies on the impact of journaling and gratitude exercises. And you do it until it sticks and it becomes a habit. And it's something that feels good and you look forward to do it. So for me, it's carving out time, being intentional about that. It's harder. I have 2 kids under 2, or a 2-year-old and just turned 2 last week, and a 1-year-old. So
your 2-year-old just turned 2?
Yeah.
Congrats, man. I have a 3 and a 5-year-old.
Okay. Yeah. So my 2-year-old turned 2
nice,
2 weeks ago, and then we have a 1-year-old turning 1.
Oh, yeah. So you're in the weeds.
Yeah, we're in the weeds. So it's, it becomes harder. And if I want to do stuff, I got to wake up before them, which is hard. Kids woke up at 5 this morning. But yeah, I think it's just setting the intention, understanding that you got to take care of yourself first in order to show up for the people around you. And I'm not perfect at it. My partner and my wife would say there's plenty of days where I'm preoccupied, but it's, it's a constant.
Yeah. We have these sort of intentions of like, being good to others and being understanding and not judging. It's the hardest to do it to yourself.
Totally.
'Cause I'm the same. I try to always find time to exercise. I journal every night, but there are nights that I miss it.
Sure.
And it used to be that I would just be so angry with myself.
Yeah.
And I would like judge myself and like, oh, and I think the key for anyone, whether it's exercise or meditation or whatever, is just like, stop judging yourself.
Stop judging yourself. Totally.
You might miss a week.
Totally.
But that's actually what meditation is.
Yeah.
Breathing, you lose your focus, go back to it.
Exactly.
And like you exercise, you miss a day, do the next day.
Totally.
But I feel like that's the hardest thing.
But that's mindfulness, right? Is to know where your energy and thoughts are going and recognize that they're happening and try to call your attention to something that feels a little bit more centered.
Yeah.
I was just reading a study that said the top 3 things, and I think it was a Harvard Business School like case study or whatever. They did this like big longitudinal report. What are the 3 things people regret at the end of their life? Number 3 was they wish they kept in touch with their friends more. Number 2 is they wish they chose a life for themselves as opposed to letting their family or their jobs dictate their choices. But number 1 clearly was having less regrets, which they actually defined as not the action, but your reaction to the action. So it's not that you regret missing the meditation or the workout, but it's the time you spend kicking yourself for doing it that people regret. And so I think the earlier you can realize recognize that you do it while you're doing it, but try to turn your attention to the present.
Yeah.
I think it's
so hard.
Very
but
hard.
I think it seems exciting about a business like this is that if you can help people, just remind them, if everybody around you is reminding you like, hey man, it's okay.
Yeah.
You missed it.
Yeah. Right.
That's a lot more helpful than just you in isolation.
Right.
So that seems like a pretty incredible sort of part of what you're building here.
Yeah.
So,
I think we, just the last thing, and I don't want to seem like we're just selling our values all day, but one of our other values are make magic moments, which, to me, magic is taking this humblest, simplest thing and turning it into something that makes you feel so special or makes someone else feel so special. And so we try to infuse that into our daily culture. We celebrate the magic moments. We talk about them. We give awards out to the manager who can collect the most. And so if you have a team where you're always kind of thinking about how do you turn something ordinary into something special, it doesn't take much.
Yeah. How does that manifest itself? Like, are there things you can think of that have happened?
In our restaurant? Oh, yeah. I mean, it can be big moments of hospitality. It can be, there was an example the other day where someone wanted lemonade, but we use coconut nectar as a sweetener, and she's allergic to coconut. So they went to the back, remade the lemonade on the fly during a busy lunch service, ran out the door, handed it to the customer, who was totally stunned.
Yeah.
So that's a huge magic moment. But it can be something little. It's remembering a teammate's birthday. It could be covering for someone, covering a shift when there's a call out. It can be like I don't buy these flowers anymore that are on the table. I bought them for the store when we opened because I thought it'd be a nice touch. There's nowhere in the SOP that it says go buy these flowers, but the GM decided she loves them. She uses her own money, goes to the little bodega, and like every day that I see the new flowers, I'm like, wow, that's a magical moment.
Yeah.
She's taking the time to do it.
I love that. So it sounds like they have a lot of empowerment to kind of.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, yes. I mean, we are always trying to find the balance between the systems and the creativity, to your point. We say, that there are some operational standards in the restaurant. Our stores always have to look wow, we call it. You got to walk in and be like, oh, wow, someone's paying attention here.
Yeah.
We don't always define what that is. There's nothing that says you have to light incense, there has to be flowers on the table, but it has to be clean. It has to be bright. The music has to be energetic. We want people to remember that there's good karma. And so we let our managers figure that out. We give them, we're always there. We give them tools. We try to be super hands-on when they want us to, but we don't micromanage it.
Yeah. That's so hard to do, but the only way that you can really scale the right way, is just having first principles that you can give to them and say, here's the result we're looking for. Here's our first principles. Go
Yeah.
have at it.
Yeah.
It does mean like sort of relinquishing control, but it really is cool how, you know, you can see the magic happen with each GM. How many stores do you have now?
We have 10.
Jeez. All right. So I'm super curious about the acquisition.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we talk about that?
Sure.
Because you recently acquired Beatnik.
Yeah.
Formerly known as By Chloe.
Formerly known.
First of all, like, did that come across your desk?
Yeah.
Or was it like, so how did it happen?
So we had a small investor that was a larger investor in Beatnik, the company formerly known as By Chloe. And they originally pitched it to us about 2 years ago as a merger opportunity. And there was, I think, a lot of interest in the market at this time when you had subscale brands, like sub 15 unit, 20 unit brands that were looking to grow. Capital had sort of dried up. And as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, we all have corporate infrastructure, whether we want it or not. You know, you need people focused on all these what you would think of as non-core things just to be in business today. You know, there's a lot more stuff that you need to be aware of. And so there was a popular idea that said, why don't you take two brands that combine the EBITDAs of the companies, consolidate some of the corporate G&A, and you know, you have a more financeable company. So it was pitched to us in that manner. I looked at the numbers, I looked at the business. It was bigger than us. So that's why it was kind of a merger. Our numbers were going one way, their numbers were going the other way.
Yeah.
The thinking was, you know, you can run both and there's synergies, and you can kind of co-locate and share customers and marketing database and all that kind of stuff. And everything I just told you about why I keep doing Inde does not apply to other brands.
Yeah.
I thought I entertained it for a second, but I just have the thing that gets me out of bed, the thing that gets me caring about the smallest detail of our business. I tried the thought exercise of trying to do that for another company, not just Beatnik, but any other company. I just don't have it. And so we ended up making an offer to them to buy the company, even though we were much smaller than they were at the time. That offer was rejected. And a few months later, they came back and they said, you know, we'll take another look at this, and we got a deal done.
Was it a merger, or was it an acquisition? An acquisition?
We acquired them, and we didn't have the cash to pay what they thought the full value was. So we gave them a very small piece of our ongoing equity for the combined business.
Did you finance that acquisition?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It was an inside round. We had a couple of investors that saw the broader opportunity and felt like we were undersized relative to our potential, mostly because COVID sort of halted all new store growth. And they asked me if I believed it, and I did. I believed that we could go from 5 to 10 and we could take on their team. I loved the corporate infrastructure that Beatnik had built, the people. We didn't let go a single person at the corporate level. Almost every GM that we have in the acquired Beatnik restaurants are Beatnik employees. I think we kept on probably 80% of their team.
Wow.
So it was a merger in some sense, but we're going forward under the Inde name.
But that's impressive, because obviously when you look at those types of deals, there's like,
you're
appreciating like, you know, overhead decrease and
totally. And now 6 months in, we've definitely made some adjustments. We had too big of a team for what we needed, but we had to take the time to figure it out.
Yeah.
But it was pretty remarkable. There was basically a 1-for-1 addition. If I was building an org chart, I would have hired for the positions that Beatnik had.
Yeah.
Versus what we already had.
Oh, that's great.
And their store, I mean, there's a lot of things that made it make sense. We were on the same POS.
Yeah.
We use the same back-end delivery providers, all the same software. We used Mies and R365 at the time. Yeah. They did as well.
And they also have the same format, which is interesting.
Exactly the same format.
The
order ahead.
Order, but there's some optionality
totally.
To the order, you know.
So same format, same hood sizes, same allocation of back of house to front of house. It was like, you know, we were co-located. There was only one store that we didn't want to take because of location. So it just made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense for us. And it got us to a store base that I think is at a different level, you know, puts us in a slightly different place in the market.
Yeah. What was the most surprising thing about that? I mean, it's the first time you acquired a company. What was the most surprising thing about that? Like, if you had to tell yourself today, like how to manage that transaction now, is there anything you would change?
All the stuff that I mentioned about the people, the real estate, the like speed of development, the cost of the renovations, because they were similar store formats, all that stuff has been absolutely true. We've gotten that almost 100% right, and I'm really proud of it. The most difficult part, I think, and I don't know if this is an acquisition issue or a post-merger integration issue, but we underwrote a lot of operational efficiencies because we thought we could apply certain margin structures from what Beatnik did, or even commission structures, which are negotiated with third-party vendors, food costs, because we'd set a theoretical food cost in Mies. Achieving those has been much, much harder.
Yeah.
And it's not because we're mismanaging the business. It's just like, it's harder to go from 5 to 10 and be as precise as you think you can be, even if you see the numbers on paper.
Yeah.
So I'd say that part it's going to take twice as long as I would have thought.
Yeah. Got it. So getting to the
sort of like the operational efficiencies are harder to realize and actionalize.
Yeah. I imagine at some point you might be looking at other acquisitions.
I think it's an interesting way. And by the way, we got the idea from completely different scale, but the Kava and Zoe's,
So would you now like consider underwriting these businesses differently, just based factoring that in?
Yeah, I'd probably underwrite it a little differently. I'd probably raise a little bit more money to get things done, and hopefully we'd get better at it. But look, if you're buying a company at 1 times EBITDA and you think the market will value the pro forma at 10, there's a ton of upside. Not every good acquisition opportunity is a good business opportunity. So I think we would be extremely selective about doing it again, but I do think it's a really fascinating way to grow.
It is really interesting that those efficiencies it's sort of the same ways if you open a second store. I remember whenever we would open another store, we always factored in a ramp down of whatever our
food costs,
whatever our margins were, both labor and food costs. We would mark up by 20% and then ramp that down over the course of 6 months. Yeah. Because you're just figuring stuff out. It's a new store, different hours, different and we always went over anyways. Yeah. But it was always worse even than the ramp down was. Yeah. But there's no way of getting around that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the lesson, because it's funny, and not to get too much into the Beatnik side of things, but they ran that business so tight. They knew to the portion what the theoretical variance between food actual and what their supposed food costs would be. And we just thought we could apply that. Yeah. Can't. Yeah. People business, people error, human error. Yeah. It takes time. Yeah. It takes time to get things dialed in.
In my opinion, the theoretical food cost is really the only real way you can impact the profit of your business from a menu standpoint, because you're basically just trying to move the margins with the same delta. So assume that the delta between actual food costs and theoretical will always be 3%, 2%, whatever it is. So can we reduce our theoretical costs by 1%? Yeah. Assuming everything will continue to overportion, waste, and screw things up, because then everything else is just gravy, right? If you can figure out how to not burn, batches and not portion, then you're just gonna get more out of it. But the only way for sure, I just generated another X amount is by lowering the theoretical.
Costs. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, we just to crystallize the example without getting too technical, we were running a 300 basis point spread. Beatnik was running 150, so we thought we could underwrite 200. Yeah. We started at 700. Yeah. The combined entity, and now we're working our way down back to like 300. So it's just
which makes sense.
Just happens. So, I to your point, the numbers will tell you one thing and the operations are a whole other thing, and it takes time. Yeah. It takes time.
So what keeps you up most at night right now?
We grew so quickly, and operationally, actually, the stuff I'm saying on the back end, the food cost, food quality, that doesn't scare me, because I know we can fix it. And actually, I'm really proud of the product. I'm proud of the culture that we built in the restaurants. They feel like Indays, in my opinion. Even this is our restaurant's only been open 2 months, but it feels like the way I want it to. The people, when I walk in, the people are doing the things that to me make the restaurant special. So it's not the operations that scare me, which is a good thing, because I think that'd be a lot harder thing to fix. I think that the thing that keeps us up at night is our business grew so rapidly, we almost haven't had a chance for the brand to catch up. And historically, I've not been good at being out in front of our company with the brand. And I think it's very counterintuitive to the way a lot of companies run today, which is the brand is much bigger than the business. Mm-hmm. You see these D2C companies, these Instagram-based businesses, and you're like, they're everywhere. And then you see the actual P&Ls, and it's like, they're doing whatever they're doing in revenue. We're the opposite. We're a pretty big business now with much smaller brand footprint and kind of name recognition. That just makes opening restaurants harder than it needs to be. And so my big focus for the remainder of the year, and probably all the way through next year, is getting the brand out in front of the business. So because, Indian food, it's not a natural thing for people to walk into. Yeah. They don't we noticed, we opened new stores and they could look beautiful. It's a beautiful looking store. The food's amazing. People are still like, what's Indian food? Where's the serve line? You know, how long is it going to take?
Yeah.
Am I going to leave smelling bad?
Now people are so used to the line.
Yeah.
That when you walk into a place
without
that's
a line,
fast casual and there's no like assembly line, you're like, what's going to happen here?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not actually sure what I should be expecting.
Yeah.
I had a Korean spot the other day near our office, and it was that concept, right?
Yeah.
And you just order, and then it comes out, and it was awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
But I was like, is this going to take an hour?
Yeah.
It's going to take 20 minutes?
Right.
Like, what am I going to get?
Right.
So it is sort of a new premise.
It is and it isn't. You know, I always remind myself that fast food started this way. You order at a counter, you wait 5 minutes, your food comes out.
Yeah.
But to your point, healthy premium lunch options have been dominated by the assembly line.
It's been an arc.
Yeah.
It was that way, then it wasn't, and now it is again. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to get the word out? Like, what's your like? Are you thinking like strategically or tactically? Like, what are the
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a combination of like, I'm not a natural marketer. It's something that comes much more difficultly to me. But yeah, it's a combination of like top of the funnel, like awareness campaigns that we got to do, whether it's on social and sort of more broader advertising. I think some of it's going to be activations and influencer kind of relationships and partnership stuff that we've got lined up for the fall. At the end of the day, I think the best marketing, and I always tell my team that, is word of mouth. You know, delivering at a really, really high level in the restaurants. I feel like we see the growth already in that. But yeah, it's a combination of just making Indian food feel a little bit more fun, a little bit more accessible for people that hold on to these stigmas about it.
Yeah. What's your day-to-day like right now? I imagine it's changed.
Yeah, it's changed. I actually, it hasn't changed too much. I spend a lot of time in numbers and the weeds, which I think I'm trying to get myself out of. We finally have a fuller org chart where we have like a finance role, we have a couple people on the ops side, we have as I mentioned, this kind of third-party catering role. So I spend more time with my teams and trying to make sure they understand what the kind of quarterly and monthly objectives are. We try to be pretty KPI driven because I think that helps. I think the way to get someone to do the work you want them to do is make it the easiest thing for them to do and the easiest thing for them to understand. So I try to spend a lot of time making sure we're clearly articulating what the objectives for the business are. So I'd say that's a big piece of it. I'm in the restaurants, not as much as I should be, but fairly often. And we're getting back, in the next couple of months, we're going to be getting back on the train to start looking at new leases and signing new leases and having to think about raising more money. So just getting prepared for that portion of it.
What makes you like blood boiling angry?
I would say there's a couple things. I think, and you mean in the business, right? Not in life?
No, anything. Generally.
I don't get that angry that often, for better or worse. But I'd say in the business, there's this perception, and I don't blame people for it because I think it's somewhat out of their control, that food has to be fast, cheap, and good. And I think all three of those things can't be true at the same time. Food is hard. Good food is even harder. And it takes time. If you're making it with love, you're making it from scratch. And it's just, we've become conditioned in this world of like instant gratification. Everything is quick. Everything is the same. Everything is exactly as advertised on TV or on Instagram. And people's tolerance has just gotten crazy. I find the reviews or the, customer feedback that we'll get sometimes, it's just like, I can't imagine that someone took the time to write this down and place these demands on the place that they got lunch.
Yeah.
I'd say that's one thing. And then the second thing is, and I'm a lifelong Democrat and, forever New Yorker, I think, but I just find that it's gotten so much harder to do business in the city on every level. And the closer I get to administrations, within, dealing with a specific issue or specific department, the more I'm terrified of how cities get run.
Yeah, man.
It's a big one, but it's just, something's got to change.
Yeah. To the first thing you said, like just that perception of either what food should cost or what, I mean, there's that old parable, there's fast, cheap, and good. You can pick two of the three.
You can pick two of the three, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
But that somehow got lost in, but also just generally, you're forgetting the fast, like, I think what the perception of what food should cost is completely out of whack, in my opinion, because you look at it like, well, I can go to the grocery store and buy this thing.
Yeah.
But
go to the grocery store right now.
Yeah. Well, number one, you know, it's more expensive at the grocery store. Number two, you have to buy, you know, enough for 100 people when you do that.
Yeah.
And then you have to store the rest of that food. And someone has to like prepare that food for you.
Yeah.
And then someone has to clean it up.
Yeah.
Someone has to choose the right like ambiance for you to be in and choose some nice music and a nice place for you to sit and like some plates that you can throw away.
Yeah.
Like all that costs money.
All of it.
And the food is just like
small part.
One of the small things. And I think because people eat out way more than they ever have, that perception has been slowly shifting. It's the frog boiling in water, and it's tough, man. And like I feel like that water is almost boiling.
And I, you know, as a diner, I understand some of the frustrations. I feel like in the city there was this deserved feeling of gratitude and compassion for restaurateurs, especially during COVID when people stayed open. And I think a lot of restaurants kind of made more money in those few years than they'd ever had before. You know, jacked up prices, leaned their staff out, built, you know, sidewalk sheds, and most of it was really incredible and admirable. But then the prices stayed up.
Yeah.
You know, supply chain disruptions came down, our input prices came down, and the prices didn't change. And on the one hand, you can argue just keeping up with kind of all the inflationary measures, and that restaurants had historically maybe been underpriced because you see all the reports that margins keep going down. But it does feel like, as a diner, that there are a lot of restaurants that have taken advantage of that and maybe sustained kind of pricing that in a place that doesn't totally feel fair, considering we are a city of people who eat out all the time. But there's got to be balances.
It's tough because it's almost like the price is normalized to what they should be. The inclination is like, well, let's go back to what it was. Right. But the margins have always been razor thin. Yeah, it's true. You know, and the problem is, I think that it's easy to sort of just look at, you know, objectively, like, hey, this thing should cost $10. But if you ask the same, you know, people in aggregate, do you want my team to have health insurance?
Right.
Do you want them to have a day off?
Yeah.
You know, do you want them to be able to, you know, like, they'd probably say, yeah, I love that. Okay, well then this needs to be an $18 bowl, not a $14 bowl.
Right.
But that is a tough, you know.
It's a tough thing. Yeah.
You know, it really is. And
people are not good at making sacrifices for a kind of vague idea.
Yes. You know? And it's just, there is a bit of that, hear no evil, you know. I mean, we wear clothes and shoes and things that cost way less because they were made overseas or for whatever reason. And at the same time, we might complain about taxes,
right?
Which I do too. We make a lot of decisions with our dollar,
sure.
You know, but it's very hard because a lot of it is, you know, let's just say, I don't want to like use plastics anymore.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Right.
They're in everything.
Right.
You know, so some things we're kind of stuck, but I do think that you can be a little bit more discerning with restaurants.
Yeah.
Decide to go to places because you believe that.
Yeah, you support the values, and I think you gave your example of Bark, and I think you're talking about like this perception of cuisines and price. But ultimately, I think it's up to the restaurateur or the business to validate for themselves why they charge what they do. Ultimately, I think people will pay higher prices if they feel like the value is there. And I think it's up to the brand and the company and the restaurant and the operation to be able to support that over time.
I agree, but I also think like, you ever read Robert Cialdini? It's his book called Influence. There's these 4 principles of influence. And one of them is the perceptual contrast.
Yeah.
And we make decisions based on, you know, somebody sells you a car for $30,000. The idea of like, you know, spending another $1,000 on an upgrade for something is, well, $1,000. I've already spent $30,000. You know, it doesn't matter. But it works the opposite way as well. And I do think it is tough. Let's just say that, you know, you have a lamb Rogan Josh you want to put on the menu, you know, and that should cost, you know, $32, you know, because of just the products you use, how much time it takes, But every other place in the city charges $15.
Yeah.
It'd be really hard to charge $32, even if, you know.
I agree with that.
Just this percent. It's like a burger, you know. Like burgers cost X amount when they're, you know, when you order at a counter versus if you sit down.
Yeah.
There's a comparison that happens no matter what. Even if, like, I mean, we at my restaurant we literally bought an entire steer from this from Righteous Organics farm upstate by the whole cow.
Yeah.
The burger was the entire cow, other than the strip loin which we sold to this butcher. It's an incredible burger. Doesn't matter. You can't charge more than, $6, $7, $8.
Yeah.
Just can't. We should,
Right.
but we can't. And I think that's part of the, partly is just this comparison thing that there almost has to be this collective agreement within restaurants, at least in this sector, like, hey, maybe we should all decide that this thing costs more.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think you can't suddenly increase prices 30% or 50% and expect people not to notice. But I think you can communicate effectively why you're priced at the higher end, get the buy-in and the trust and the storytelling down, and gradually increase to where you need to get to.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit what we talked about, in terms of theoretical food costs, you got to know what your basis is.
Yeah.
And if you're selling it at 10, but it's worth 15, you got to celebrate the hell out of the fact that you're selling it at 10. You're giving the customer that perceived value.
Yeah.
And then you get you earn the right over time to charge them 15 for it.
Yeah.
But if you're selling it at 15, if you're selling it at 10, you think it's worth 15 and you're just complaining that you can't raise prices, you're never going to win.
Yeah. And the flip side also is like, if you do charge a lot more, let's say you do charge what you should, like $15, sometimes it can actually just even out, because let's just say that 20% of people just
won't come. Yeah.
Don't come anymore. But the people that actually believe and understand, they do come, and it actually ends up still being more revenue with less people, because the people that actually believe in what you're doing pay for it. So
and I think it's when you do charge 15 for that otherwise $10 item, the pressure is on you then to make sure that you're delivering a $15 experience.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that too.
Yeah. And a lot of that is also combated with service and people.
Totally. 100%.
You gotta screw something up always. There'll always be somebody that orders something and they got the wrong thing, or it was cold or whatever. Like that happens.
There's no question.
How you handle it, and making sure you have people that'll actually
absolutely,
follow up and apologize and take care of it, matters way more.
Well, no, because it's what you're saying. That $15 has to not just pay for the organic beef. It's got to pay for the training of the team to make sure that they know that the guest feels taken care of.
Yeah. 100%. We could talk for hours about this, but this was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking some time.
Of course.
And also thanks for turning on the music, because we're actually at Inday in Soho, and the music has been down, but we'll crank it back up.
We'll crank it back up.
This was awesome, man.
This was great. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice to hear more of your story, and the concept of letting people kind of scale their dreams is one that we take to heart.
Me too. All right. Cool, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.